What's up, friends? Welcome to Leaders, Letters, and Legacy alongside Dr. Marianne Kale. I'm your co-host, Scott Fussell, and we are thrilled you decided to tap play and spend some time with us today. We'd love it if you would consider Leaders, Letters, and Legacy a verbal archive for many of the stories and the people who have shaped the fraternity sorority movement for the past 2+ centuries. It's time we shine a light on leaders. It's time we help them write a love letter about their letters. It's time we talk about the legacy we want to leave behind. It is time for another episode of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy. Let's go. Hey, what's up, world? So glad to have you back for another episode of Letters, Leaders, and Legacy. We're thrilled that you decided to spend some time with us today. We have an incredible conversation coming your way alongside my good friend, Dr. Marianne Kale. I'm your host, Scott Fussell, and we are thrilled that you decided to tap play and spend some time with us today. Dr. Mack, how are you?
I'm great, Scott. It's a beautiful day and I am ready for this conversation. But I have a question for you.
What's
up with the sweatshirt? I mean, you have some different.
I dressed up for you today.
Asking.
You want an honest answer?
I do.
That's the only thing I know how to get. Yeah, no, I think one of the greatest showcases of strong, independent, talented women today is the WNBA. I host a podcast with one. I am married to one. I'm raising one, and we have one on the show today. So I just felt like, you know what, my shout out to the W is it just seemed appropriate today. So I hope that's all right. But that's the tie in with the shirt today. But man, we've got an incredible guest today. Really checks all of those boxes in terms of being smart, independent, driven, gifted, and has impacted so many. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who we got coming on the show today?
Well, Scott, when we first started our list, this was one of my first folks. Her name is Heidi Guest. I met Heidi in 2009, I believe. I was volunteering for Tri Delta, and Heidi was the guest speaker at our volunteer leadership conference in Memphis. And that day was the first time I had ever visited St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I was so impacted by Heidi's story and the way that she wove her life stories in, and was one of the first folks I had ever seen to use a personal photo. There was a photo of her as a little girl with her family. And it just, I mean, all these years later, it's still one of the things that has actually given me the courage to do the same, because I never would have thought of doing that before Heidi. We're ready to bring her into the world and for you all to meet her.
There she is. And there she's gone.
Everybody.
Heidi, click. Hey, Heidi, click your video one more time. You double clicked on us.
I got so excited about coming in. Look here. How'd that
There
go?
it is. That's awesome. Looks great. Perfect. Gosh, we're so glad to have you with us today. Thanks for saying yes.
Well, thank you for asking me. I'm delighted to join you, and I love this initiative that you're on. So I'm happy to climb aboard.
Heidi is a longtime Tri Delta undergrad from UC Davis, and has just traveled as a consultant for us, for Tri Delta. For those of you who don't know, I work for Tri Delta, but I'm a member of Theta Phi Alpha. But Heidi, throughout her journey, Heidi's always said yes, and has ebbed and flowed. Very busy life. And I think probably around 2009, you jumped back in a more active way. And you want to tell us a little bit about maybe your experience and how you got here? Because we want to really know, why have you stayed involved? And how has Tri Delta impacted your journey through life? So I get to see all of her. She has 2 beautiful children and an amazing husband, and she's connected with my family, and so it's been really cool. So Heidi, tell us a little bit about you, if you don't mind.
Well, I began my sorority life at University of California, Davis, as you shared, and I pledged when I was 17 years old. Oh, wow. I'm 63 now, so that's a lot of years of membership. And I think I pledged because it was this home away from home experience, and I was a young freshman and in a big school, and my parents weren't so into me doing that. I was there for academics, but once I told them the story of the group I pledged, Tri Delta, They really were very supportive my entire university career because there was an emphasis on academics, on philanthropy. It was so much more than parties. And that's where I got started. You know, life took off after graduation, and I traveled for Tri Delta all over the country, started a new chapter up at Dartmouth College. And then I got involved in the beauty industry, and it was a commitment. I literally went from the mailroom all the way up into key leadership position at Clinique, the largest brand in North America and in the world. And I had to pull away. I was one of the first executives to manage a major responsibility with two small children. And certainly I had a husband that was really helping too, but I was kind of one of the first. There were a number of babies born at Clinique after I got to lead, which always made me very happy to show women that they could balance both if they so chose. But Marianne's right. I got back in. It was the call of St. Jude and the call of philanthropy that made me say, wait a minute, stop. They're asking you to speak. Go, even though the friendships were maintained over time, both in my chapter and beyond. But St. Jude captured my heart. I was asked to be a keynote speaker, and that brought me right back in to friendships from way back. And I began to become more and more involved, not as a traditional alumna member because I couldn't, based on my responsibility and based on my travel schedule. So that's a little bit about me, but I'm as committed today as I was when I first pledged.
And you know, Heidi, one of the things that for me that really connected us after that St. Jude experience was your commitment to philanthropy was a number of different things. And you started an initiative, right? Or a nonprofit. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience as well?
Yeah, after I left Clinique, I think this is what you're referring to, I took some time off because I wanted to be a full-time mom. I really did. The Estee Lauder Corporation allowed me to do work for them, but also be at home more, which was great. Well, I started my own strength-based business, which is what I did at the Estee Lauder companies, building talent-based organizations. And I thought, you know, there are so many executives that get this wonderful counsel on their strengths, what's right about them, which is something Tri Delta always focused on in me too, now that I think about it. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to bring this to people that are less fortunate? I was introduced to a couple at St. Anthony High School in Jersey City, New Jersey, and their coach, Bob Hurley, I got to watch and see how he sent more and more kids to college, not on athletic scholarship, but on academic scholarship. And many of these kids were living at poverty level. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could do something for kids that didn't play basketball? And so we brought in what was called the Priceless People Program. So my paying clients, a portion of their fees went to this particular program. And we adopted kids at the freshman year and took them through their college experience with the goal of getting kids to college. And so many of my kids right now are PhDs and have graduated. They're in their 30s. It was some of the best work of my life.
You're talking about Dad Bob Hurley. I think so many people associate, obviously, the entire family now that both sons and the dad are essentially basketball legends at this point. Yeah. I don't know that everybody fully appreciates their impact off the court. That they're creating champions that are excelling way outside the 94 feet of a basketball court. I love that you just shined a light on him and that he partnered with you to create this opportunity for people that might not have had it otherwise. Because we spend a lot of time, the world spends a lot of time telling us what we're not, and for you to speak into their strengths and help people understand what they are, who they are. Man, what a gift. What a gift.
Yeah, I remember one boy, his name's Efren. He's all grown up now, but I remember it was the first time he'd been exposed to someone telling him what was right about him. And I even get all choked up now. And these kids oftentimes were a little suspicious of adults, especially people that look like me coming in, do-gooders, so to speak. And I spoke to him about what was exceptional because this points out it's a statistically validated online assessment that really tells you what's right about you and what allows you the greatest potential for excellence. And Efren said, have you been following me? Because I was speaking to what he knew about himself he had amazing creative talent, but in that particular parochial school, it was a different mentality than strengths-based leadership. And Mr. Hurley and I didn't always agree about how you develop human potential. He was very successful. I was very successful, but very different routes to doing that. And what I learned from Efren and so many kids like him is the importance of really speaking to what's right about a person to build them. We did that with executives, and we had people, very hardened executives cry and say, why didn't somebody tell me about this earlier? So that's why I was so inspired to do this. And now, after leaving many years in beauty, about 40, I'm founding my own strengths-based business now, which is really what I'm about. It's not about beauty. Beauty was something I was interested in, that I devoted my career to, what I'm known for. But I really was about building strength-based teams and building people up. And that's probably what I'll be best known for.
Well, that's all about unleashing the greatness that is uniquely wired in each of us, right?
Yes.
It's funny. I teach a parenting and teachers course called the Nurtured Heart Approach, and one of the things that we discuss is the emotional intensity of many of our young people now. And for a lot of reasons, this is a very emotionally intense generation, and the research shows that. And the inputs are so relentless of what they are being told they are not, that when somebody sees the greatness in them, they're skeptical. So you have to give them evidence. You've got to almost put your attorney hat on and show them the evidence of, no, these are your strengths. This is your greatness. And I see that because I see it coming to life, because I see how you exhibit it on a daily basis. So when Efren asks you, have you been following me? It's probably because he, to your point, he's probably hearing all these inputs from the outside world of this is what I'm not. And now somebody's telling me what I am. My goodness, what an extraordinary, eye-opening experience this is. Didn't know. And so, yeah.
I remember saying to him, because he had an unbelievable creative talent. And this is common for kids that are growing up in a place where they sometimes have to imagine more so than other kids. And I said, Efren, I bet that when you give an answer in a class, you might give an answer, if it's the alphabet, that's D, E, F, but the teacher says the only right one is A, B, C. And he said, yes, that happens to me all the time. So you can imagine somebody that's so innovative and visionary and creative, not really fitting in the boxes. And I think that was his moment.
Wow.
And Scott uses this term that he's taught us from the Nurtured Heart experience of connection before correction. Yes. And I love that. And one of the things that I think all the research is showing about this generation, they're getting a little tired of the influencers, I think. If they're not creating community, if they're not being authentic. And so and generations make all these ebbs and flows and shifts. And Heidi, one of the things that I loved about, I was able to listen in on Heidi. She actually allowed my niece to participate in the strengths assessment. And I was able to listen to that. And I remember thinking, Callie has found their way through music and just, again, the creativity, but in some ways, not a normal path that some people would think. College might not be the path you want to be on. But for the children and for the young people who don't know that they can be, I think that's where the voices have to be the loudest. Our family is kind of, do what you do, boo. Do what's but I think to your work, Heidi, and I think about Sarah Ida Shaw. Sarah Ida Shaw is one of TriDelta's, or she's attributed as the main founder. On our Dorcas Pond, we bring her in as well. But when you think about, and if you could talk a little bit about Sarah Ida Shaw's vision for looking for women's inner beauty, especially for someone who has been in the beauty industry for so long. How does that tie into your work? Because that's especially at the era of time where women were being so judged by their external beauty, and you're in the heart of it, right? Kind of as a trailblazer. Can you tie those two worlds together a little bit, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and I remember the first time I discovered beauty, I think I was 3 or 3.5. And that's why I show that picture of me that you probably remember, is that's when I saw it. I saw that beauty was a concept. I was attracted to beautiful things, beautiful qualities in people, beautiful environments. To me, it's all the same. Beauty is it's right up there with kindness. It's right up there with creativity, receptivity. Beauty's big, but external beauty, I think, in this day and age, and in a lot of time, has been how women have been valued. What do you
Hmm.
look like? What does this influencer say you have to use? All of this. And I've never been into that. Never. I think it's lovely to choose a color that looks great on you, or if a lipstick makes you feel better in presenting yourself to the world, wonderful. I don't judge it, but I think it can get out of hand. And what I loved about Tridelta and Sarah Ida Shaw and Eleanor Dorcas Pond, they were really looking at the intellectual, spiritual, and other aspects of beauty. And they were women in 1888 that were going to college. I mean, my own grandmother was born in 1895. And so, I think about what her possibilities were and then how these women were trailblazing by being smart. That's beautiful. By being, wanting to lead other women to a new day, but also being respectful of men, because that's important too. I was quite touched, and I remember there was one part of our ritual that I think I can share where they wrote, "Have perfect confidence in thyself." I thought that was one of the most beautiful thoughts I have ever heard. And that's kind of been my guiding premise because we're all scared as we go through different phases of our life. But I always hear, have perfect confidence in thyself. That is one of the most beautiful beliefs because it has to start in here. All beauty starts in here. And so as I led at Tridelta, at Clinique, at QVC and philosophy, I was always about looking at the inner beauty, the inner talent that comes through the person. Because I've seen a million beautiful faces. I've seen some of the most beautiful faces in the world. But if the internal beauty doesn't match, it isn't beautiful. And I think that's the key thing. When you bring out people's internal beauty, no matter who they suddenly become very attractive, very magnetic. And what I love is when people are that authentic, they invite others to also bring out their best. And that creates beautiful teams. It creates beautiful organizations. And I believe that with everything that's in me. I've worked with some of the most beautiful people because I've worked with some of the most talented people who've been accountable to using their talent. And that's attractive.
Hmm. Gosh, that's so beautifully said. You mentioned influencers, and gosh, in a world where we generally see just people's highlight reel on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, or how do we help our young people redefine what is beautiful, like you have, and help them see it in themselves when all of these outside influences are telling them what they are not? So, what are some really practical ways that we can help flip the script on that definition, especially when we're working with young people?
Yeah. Do you know the one thing I've learned over time, because, I grew up in a very different culture where marketers kind of led the story of who you are, who you want to be. And Clinique never used models. That was why I chose them. They just focused on the product being hero. It was a whole different thing. I didn't want to work for a brand that said you have to look like this. That never resonated with me. And I've gotten, as I've gotten older, increasingly cranky about the role of the influencer. But what I'm also really careful about is I realize that, and this is what I tell young people too, I know the story behind a lot of the influencers, in beauty. And I know that they are also talented people with a mission out to achieve something. Number of followers, that companies are hiring them based on their number of followers, not necessarily based on their expertise, and that
Mhm.
that will go away over time. But what stays is when you take the time to water your own grass as opposed to looking at somebody else's. And so I don't put the influencer down. I just say, here's the context of the influencer. And, we respect this is a job just like any other job, but it isn't about helping you live into your best potential. It's about getting more followers. They're different goals, and that gets them more work and more money. So it's how this business is working right now, where I draw the line with my own kids who aren't as focused on that, but other young people I've worked with is, so what do you influence? What's your sweet spot? What are you an
Come on.
influencer about? And that usually, in most cases, because I work with all sorts of people, but I do work with a lot of students. And I kind of turn it back on them to say, this is what you admire about them. Why? Okay, now, what do you influence? What do you do? And then let's look at your talents and strengths and look at where you have the ability to be the decision maker, to be the leader, because that's what most people want to be. That's why they're following this influencer. They want to get counsel on how to be more whatever it is. And I just ask them to turn it back in. And what will they influence and what will they be remembered for?
Gosh, I love that so much. When you ask a student or a young professional, what are you an influencer in? What's the verbal and nonverbal reaction you get from folks? Because I'm literally feeling like I grew 6 inches while you were sharing that. Because I'm thinking, if somebody asked me the question, like, what are you trying to influence? I'm like, wait a minute, I've got the power to do that. That's in
Right.
me. And so you're unleashing a gift I didn't know I had. So let me now pay attention and start to think about what I can do for folks. And I just imagine, especially somebody who has been so successful, so wildly successful and influential as you have been, to receive that question from you. I can't imagine what the reaction has to be when you ask that question. So talk about it.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I'm thinking across people, not just students. I'm thinking about a lot of people in organizations and
Sure.
all sorts of things. And usually the first thing I get, Scott, is silence. I get silence. And I just sit with the silence.
Hmm.
I learned that as an executive. You don't always want to be filling in all the spaces. You got to let people, go through those levels of learning to know, to understand before they can be able to. So usually there's silence. But you know what? In most cases, because they're coming to me for a reason, there's a little bit, and the word I think of immediately is delight, because maybe that's what they dream of, but they haven't really been able to couch it that way. And because of my, I have a pleasing and warm personality, but I am a driver. So when I am making them accountable to say, okay, so what is it for you? People sense I'm serious, but they also sense I want the best for them
Yeah.
because I see the best in them, and oftentimes I have to say, listen, these strengths are statistically validated. I'm not just making this up to make you feel good. This is what you own, but it's not enough to have the talent. You've got to figure out how to deploy it. So let's talk about the talent first, and then I want you to dream about how you might deploy. Does that make sense?
Well,
Yes.
what's funny is if you're just listening to not watching us, Scott and I's faces, we're so enamored. We're both like, in all honesty, and you're right, Heidi, you are so authentic and you're clear. I think you're very clear about how you live, what you believe, and how you then put that into a space to help others. It's a spirit about you. When I visited your chapter last year after you had been there, they were like, we love Heidi Guest. Oh my gosh. And I mean, what? They had maybe been with you for a short period of time, but you leave that impression, right? Because you genuinely care about the other human that is with you. And that doesn't come natural for everyone. I mean,
No.
No.
and sometimes it's not a learned skill. Sometimes
No.
it's the
But
gifts that you were given,
what's so funny is that I've always felt Like when I was in the sorority, I got a beautiful little award when I pledged it, or when I was initiated. It was called MIP is what it said, Most Inspirational Pledge. And I keep that around with me because when you have a talent or ability, it's in you. You can't help but show it. But it was when I saw my executive profile where I saw that my individualized approach, ability to look at people uniquely, was off the charts. And each one of us has something that's off the charts. And then my strategic ability, my ability to see a future that others couldn't see, when those two things came together, no wonder I so love being a people builder. No wonder, because I loved looking at who they were and where they could go, and then helping them imagine that. So I'm using my talents. And I think when you can use your talents, you never worry about being authentic. It's just who you are. So when you invite people, like you were asking me, Scott, to be their authentic selves, there's something in their internal knowing that says, oh my God, this is who I am. It's who I want to be. I don't need to be this or that. This is enough. And it might sound a little corny, but that's what I see in the transformation from executives to students, anyone, including me, always I always say, be accountable to your talent, because you can't just have
Wait,
it.
whoa, 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 whoa. Say that one more time.
You have to be accountable to your talent. It isn't enough for me to know my top 10 or whatever it is. I've got to think of ways to use and deploy it every day. And that's what I make people do. I make them do it because it's like a muscle. If you'd never put a tennis racket in my favorite guy, Rafael Nadal's hand, he never would have known what he was capable of. Now, tennis is a skill, but I'm sure there are lots of talents, the strategic number of things that go into that. But you've got to tell somebody, this is what you own, but you've got to use it. So let's imagine creative ways you can use it at home, at work, in community. And once you begin playing with it, it's actually fun because it gives off the same endorphins as if you were doing a long distance run. Now, I don't get those endorphins, but I hear people do. But I get them from using my talents. That is, it's actually something that contributes to a person's well-being. A ton of research in positive psychology says. So if you let people know this is what you own, you just got to be able to use it. That's a powerful gift.
I don't know that there's a more powerful gift that you can give someone,
I don't think so.
frankly, for you to enable somebody to walk in their greatness, to recognize it, and then to walk in it. Come
Yeah.
on now.
Yeah.
Oh, but I think in Brene Brown's work, right, she talks about vulnerability and do the things that you're talking about, Heidi. I think we have to be willing to be vulnerable, to step into spaces and to know that you might not be great at everything you try, but you might be great at something. And I
Exactly.
think that, to me, that's where so many folks, the book Good to Great, I just
Yeah.
challenged a group of students the other day. I was like, if you haven't read the book, just use the synopsis. There are a lot of really good organizations and whatever out there, but which ones become great and why? And I
Mhm.
think that's how you've built your life, right? You've only you have been very thoughtful in the environments that you've chosen to invest your talents and your time and your treasure as a part of. And I've been fortunate enough to watch that.
Thanks so much for joining us for part one of our two-part conversation with TriDelta's Heidi Guest. Join us next month for part two of our conversation with Heidi as we dive into her service with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Take care, everyone. Today's show was hosted by Dr. Marianne Kale and Scott Pucell. For more information, please follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also follow Dr. Mack and Scott on social or on the web at mariannekale.com and scottpucellcoaching.com. Thanks again for tapping play and joining us for another episode of Leaders, Letters, and Legacy. This has been a Find Your People production. Hey, what's up, America? So good to see you again. Welcome back to another episode of Letters, Leaders, and Legacy.
Go back. You said America. We might be more than America.
So that's how we're going to, we're global now. Okay.
Nice.
We haven't even launched our first episode yet. You're already saying that we were a global podcast juggernaut. Okay. All right.